Horsey,
Simon!
horsey,
Simon!
horsey,
I said no!
horsey, 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 horsey.
The Outer Limits was a sci-fi dark fantasy anthology series that originally aired in 1963, but was revived in 1995. Each episode of the show featured a different short story, similar in tone to the Twilight Zone, but not entirely the same. The Outer Limits featured aliens, science experiments gone wrong, dystopian futures, and more. Unlike the popularized Twilight Zone series, however, The Outer Limits focused on stories that were more visceral and interpersonal, dealing with topics like unhealthy obsession, unrestrained emotion, and, in this particular episode, denial and the consequences of the inability to move on. You see, the 90s featured quite a few different anthology shows meant to scare and shock you in different ways. There's the unforgettable Tales from the Crypt series, which was a dark comedy show at its core. Then the kids had their Goosebumps series, as well as Are You Afraid of the Dark, bringing youngsters nightmares for the decades to come. But The Outer Limits was the odd child. Its stories aren't often as reflected on or mentioned today, not when compared to the cornerstones of horror anthology that I just mentioned, but its ideas are much longer lasting, at least in my opinion. Look at it this way. Even today as a society, we have fears of what artificial intelligence may become, of what Pandora's box science may next open, of how alone or not alone we are in the universe. This brings me to the episode in question, the episode of The Outer Limits that disturbed me and many others the most. Season 6, Episode 8, Simon Says. This episode features Gideon Banks, an electronic engineer who tragically and all too soon loses his wife and son in a car accident. Unable to let go of his family, he employs his area of expertise by transferring his son's engrams into the operating system of an odd-looking robot he has built. One look at this robot, and you can see why this episode stands out almost immediately. Its face is the epitome of Uncanny Valley, and what unfolds later in the episode is sheer nightmare fuel. And if you're wondering what engrams are, they're theorized to be how memories are stored in the brain. In essence, this episode of The Outer Limits portrays a desperate father using the faint remnants of his child's brain matter to create a hollow imitation of his beloved son, encased in a cold plastic and metal conglomerate. As the episode continues on, we see that the robot boy does not always act like a normal human boy. At first coming off a typical spoiled child, he begins to behave in ways that are not typical of any human at all. In one scene, Simon demands that Zoe, Simon's cousin, babysit him. After not getting his way, he becomes violent and angry, injuring Zoe. Gideon, the father, is in denial that his robot son is anything but fine. When Zoe tries to warn him that Simon isn't right, Gideon becomes angry. That is his son, after all. There can't be something wrong with his little angel. Soon, Gideon's boss finds out about the robot he built using company equipment that he stole, and claims that because of this, Simon and the technology behind him belong to the company. Fearing that someone will now take his son from him again, Gideon kills his boss. Oddly enough, the most disturbing scene of this episode, and in the entire series in my opinion, isn't as relevant to the plot as these other two scenes I've just discussed. You see, Gideon begins to build more and more of a body for Simon to use. Starting out as seemingly not much more than a torso and head, Simon soon gets arms. Around this time, Simon mentions that Tina, their cat, doesn't seem to like him anymore, and is saddened because she avoids him. But not to worry, Simon gets his chance to finally pet Tina. Warning: if you are faint of heart and sensitive to gore or violence involving animals, I recommend you click away now. Alright then, here is the scene you've been waiting for. It's quite the doozy. Gideon comes home one night. The lights are off. When he tries to turn them on, Simon requests that he keeps them off so as not to wake or stir Tina, because Tina is in his lap, finally letting Simon pet her. Gideon smiles broadly, happy that the cat finally accepted this new version of his son. But as he moves forward, seeing more detail in the moonlight through the nearby window, his smile turns to a grimace of sheer horror at what he sees. Simon does have Tina, but he has pet off half of her skin and flesh with his inhuman robotic claws. Tina is nothing more now than a lump of viscera. Simon then looks up from the mess, as if he doesn't understand that he's just massacred their beloved cat, then says slowly in the most menacing child voice I've ever heard, This episode of The Outer Limits is so much darker than most of the other episodes I've seen, blatantly showing disgusting scenes involving an innocent animal, a sociopathic child, the most creepy-looking practical effects ever assembled to visualize a homicidal child robot. All of this on daytime TV. I remember watching tons of The Outer Limits on TV when I was staying home from school or getting back early, which might explain why I'm so into creepy things these days. Simon Says is a heavy and hard to digest episode about tragedy, the stages of grief, and the endless cycle of tragedy begetting more tragedy for those who cannot overcome loss. It teaches us a lesson that death is normal and that we should all move on from it appropriately, healthily. But refusing to do so can only lead to damage or destroy more lives. In this dark sci-fi version of Pinocchio, sometimes it's best that the dead remain dead. I recommend giving The Outer Limits a watch. It's available with a subscription to Hulu. Sure, the acting can be hit or miss, and some of the effects and film quality does not age quite well, but its themes, dark subject matter, and stories are timeless. After all, finding something new to scare you is always worth it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode or want to disturb your friends, leave a like, share the video all over the place, and leave a comment below. It'd be cool to hear from you about what you think the creepiest 90s TV scenes were. The 90s were an awkward and chilling time for us all. Until next time, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one. Strange.